Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drumm McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at changinghighered.com. And now, here's your host, Drumm McNaughton.
Thank you, David. Our guest today is Dr. Nivine Megahed, president at National Louis University. For those of you who don't know NLU, you should. NLU was founded in 1886 for a then radical purpose, a college to train women as kindergarten teachers. Founded by Elizabeth Harrison, she believed that the future prosperity of a community began with the education of its youngest children, and that teaching was a noble and difficult profession that demanded a college degree. NLU is a great story in transformation, going from a college on the brink of closure back 12 years ago to doubling its enrollment and creating an institution who lives its values of innovation, excellence, access, and equity. Nivine joins us today to talk about their journey and what it takes to turn around a higher ed institution. Nivine, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm looking forward to our conversation. You have done some amazing things at National Louis University over the years. You've been there, about 10, 12 years?
Yes, since 2010.
Wow. I'm sure it seems like the time has just flown by to you. But before we get into National Louis, tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, you've got a fascinating background.
Well, I have been in the higher ed space my entire career, starting out as a faculty member, and I think driven by this concept of wanting to make a difference in the world. And initially it was in the classroom with students, and eventually it was, leading programs and then leading institutions. And then today it's serving as the leader at National Louis. So pretty long history. I'm probably a little bit unusual in that I've worked both in non-for-profit and for-profit sectors of higher ed. So I think that I have a slightly different lens in that I really love the mission of higher education and nonprofit higher education in particular. But I also feel like I've learned a lot around the discipline of the business of higher education in some of my other experiences.
You certainly have, and your family history is also very interesting as well.
Yes, so I am Egyptian by birth. I am an immigrant to this country, so it's pretty exciting to have grown up and then to be able to assume a position like this where, I really get to work with so many talented individuals to make such an impact on our communities. And interestingly, my background was such that when we came to this country, one of the things that really inspired me to take, for example, the most current position was the recognition that my father had been doing a lot of work to serve underserved individuals very quietly without telling us, which we hadn't learned until he was dying. And when I learned about that, I had said to him, "Oh my God, my life has no meaning compared to your life." And so at the time that he was getting sicker and sicker, what I said to him is, "I promise you that for the rest of my life, I am going to work to try to make the kind of difference you've made in the world." And that's actually what led to my most current role and the work that we do here.
Which is why I think it's so fascinating, because you bring I can't say completely different, because I'm sure there are some other folks who have a similar background to you, but that culture of service, that mentality of service, especially to underprivileged folks, is in your DNA. And I think that's one of the things that makes NLU so special.
Totally. That is totally one of the things that I think makes this institution a little unique.
And for you, it's a really good fit. I mean, as we were talking, last week about NLU, it was founded by a woman who was really looking to
Mhm.
educate women in that era. Can tell us a little bit about the history, because I think that really comes to bear very, very importantly on one, who you are, and two, who the institution is.
Yeah, so this institution was founded in 1886, and it was by a woman. And you say the same thing. You just said it. It was founded by a woman who believed in educating other women to educate children, and it started out as a teaching school. And I always say, like, so that sounds very mundane today, but in 1886 we had this philosophy, first of all, that children should be seen and not heard. And so it was a very radical idea to say, no, we're going to nurture their mind, body, and spirit. We're going to teach them to engage with each other in the community and to build their creativity. That was a very, very unusual stance to take in 1886, let alone educating women who were often immigrant women. And this is 1886. Even in the 50s, the prospects for women were either you became a teacher or a nurse. In 1886, to become a teacher was radical. So when you really think about what that means for this institution, I always say that was the seeds of our DNA were born with our founder. And when I came to this institution, the moniker on the institution was innovation, access, and excellence, which I completely resonated with, because and I read about the history and I said, oh my God, there are so few institutions that believe you can, first of all, pursue an access mission where you're giving individuals broadly opportunities to be educated, at the same time pursuing excellence. Because so often we perceive excellence, meaning you pick the top tier students and they make your institution excellent. And I always say that is excellence for wimps. We really pursue excellence by choosing students who really believe they don't have prospects for higher education, and inspiring and empowering them to become educated and to become sort of the economic engines for themselves, for their families, and their communities. And the fact that this institution had it right up there, and then put next to it innovation. So, because I feel like you have to be innovative to pursue both access and excellence, was the trifecta for me. It was like, oh my God, you're speaking my love language.
Well, I can easily see and hear that, because you just came alive in talking about that thing, and it's a match made in heaven. You've got a institution who has the same values that you do. This isn't a job for you, it's a calling.
I would agree with that. It definitely felt like there was sort of a broader sense of like, this is where I'm supposed to be at this time, working in this place, and it's because it's speaking so much to who I am, right?
Oh, most definitely. And the recognition that you guys have gotten at National Louis has just been amazing.
Right.
U.S. News World Report, others, recognizing the unique place and the incredible value that you provide to your students.
Yes, yes. I like to think we're the norm breakers, or the norm contrarians, right? Because to first of all put innovation, access, and excellence is not sort of the norm, and then the second was that the ratings and the acknowledgments that we've received are not sort of the traditional acknowledgments. The acknowledgments we received are about achieving social and economic mobility on behalf of our students. They're about students ranking us as one of the top institutions that prepares them to make the world a better place, which are just so mission relevant for us, but also really speak to what I believe is the sort of true impact that education can have. When really, when students walk away and feel empowered and they're economically mobile and feeling that they can now have agency to make the world around them better, it's like, how much more, satisfying and gratifying can it be?
Well, absolutely. And the recognition that you've got from Washington Monthly and others is amazing. What brings a smile to my face is second in the Midwest for best bang for the buck.
Yes,
And the vast majority of your graduates are debt free upon graduation. I mean, that's
yes,
amazing.
yes. Yes.
But it's not always been this way, has it?
No, that's not. So, you talk about like this is a calling for you, and I felt so much when I got here, like this is where I'm supposed to be. This is going to be so amazing. What an amazing opportunity to get to serve as the leader of this institution. And when I arrived and really took a good hard look at the institution was in a lot of trouble. And so much so that we actually had to seriously consider whether the institution was going to survive or not. And so I
Hmm.
remember thinking, even back then, I thought it was a calling. And I'm like, what kind of calling is this that I'm going to end up like having this place fall apart on me? Oh, this is horrible. But, we just dug in and said, all right, let's have at it and see if we can like make this better.
Well, at the beginning, you had to make really tough decisions. With any turnaround process, that's the case.
Yes.
So talk us through some of those decisions you had to make.
Yeah, so it was, like 2010, 2011, and we were in that very long recession, and we were not alone in struggling. A lot of institutions were struggling. We were struggling more because we were still highly recognized as a teacher preparation institution and not a whole lot else. And of course, teacher preparation was also in a real downturn. So we probably lost 30% of our revenue, and we were very tuition driven as an institution. So we did a uh, unheard of like 5-week program review process across the institution because we came to the conclusion the only way we were going to survive was to reduce programs, staffing, people, and to reposition the institution completely. We could not sustain ourselves. And we pulled all the data together that we could on enrollment trends for different programs and student persistence and all those kinds of things. And we had a broad series of faculty committees working on all of this, but it was very quick. And at the end, what was really interesting was at the very end, the faculty actually came forward and said, here are the programs that, based on these criteria, really would be the ones that need to be cut. And I remember I pulled in the faculty, like the governance committees, and said, hey guys, so you understand that if we cut these programs, we're cutting the faculty and a lot of the staff affiliated with it. And I'm very much committed to a whole shared governance approach on this. Do you guys all want to work with us on that? What was interesting was the lesson at the time was they said, nope, nope. We gave you recommendations. We can't, you just do it. We don't want anything to do with this because our peers will kill us. So, so we're like, okay. So we did.
Well, I hope all those faculties have retired since then, because when this comes out, that's going to be
I think they
interesting.
pretty much have. I think they pretty much have. So we
Okay.
proceeded without their input on it, right? I mean, we proceeded without their input was on the programs. They didn't want us, and I don't blame them. Like, who wants to say, yes, my peer so and so has to be cut now, right? I get it.
Yeah, I don't like that person, so get rid of them.
Or worse, right?
Or worse, yeah.
So we made the cuts, and we probably cut 25 to 30% of the institution. It was a really, really difficult process. And I remember that my peers, my peer presidents in Chicago came to me because we hit the papers. It was bad. Said, "Oh, you are not going to make it. How could you do that? You're just not going to make it." And I said, I might not. I mean, but I'm in close conversation with the board, and I've actually said to them, if they need me to just do the turnaround and go, I'm happy to do that. They were like going, that's crazy that you pulled this off, and no one does that. And I said, we had no choice. You guys don't get it. There's no choice. So we did, and it was hard for a couple of years, right? We had to spend a lot of time rebuilding trust with the faculty, building like over communicating a lot of transparency around what was happening in the strategy and the numbers, what was working, what wasn't, because they were just devastated by this, which again was understandable. But we did it and we clawed our way back. But we also said, all right, now we have the opportunity to think about what do we need to be as an institution? Who should we be? Where do we need to go?
And so with that, you had to have the board on board, no pun intended,
Yes.
with what you were going. So tell us a little bit about those conversations that you had with the board about how to move this thing forward, and then their support
Yeah.
afterwards.
I mean, you cannot do this without the support of the board. You absolutely cannot do it without your board. I'm very grateful that I had a board that had uh, they had a lot of political will around it, and they said we have no choice. They saw the numbers as much as I saw the numbers, and even though there was a lot of like internal revolt and turmoil, they stood with me and they had my back and weren't one bit thwarted. They were like, we did what we had to do. And I remember a conversation when I said to them, like, look, if you need me to step down, I get it. That's, the person who does this is usually the person who then leaves. And they were like, no, there is no scenario where you step down. And each one of them said, I'll step down. I'll take the hit and step down. And I remember joking with them, going like, you guys look too anxious to step down. Why is everyone wanting to step down? But no one had to step down, and we did work our way through it. But I will tell you, you have to go through a process of healing. For the next 2 years, I did monthly dinners in my home with groups of faculty where we just broke bread together and talked together and tried to like learn who each other were. And, they saw that like I wasn't this, this nefarious, horrible, evil person who just wanted to ruin lives of faculty and staff. And I actually tell this one story where I remember after a couple glasses of wine, and actually it's happened on more than one occasion, because the faculty were pretty mad, right? They were mad at me, and they had to be mad somewhere, right? So I was a great target. And I remember at one point, one of them was like crying to me saying, I'm so sorry. I know we're so mean to you, but please don't leave us. And
Wow.
yeah, so I
Wow.
remember, my background is a clinical psychologist. And so I remember thinking, gosh, this is like the individuation phase of kids where they're like, I hate you, but don't leave me. You know? So I just said to them, hey, we're in this together. We'll get through this. And we did. And I'm so glad because so many wonderful things have happened since then. And we have had such great impact since then. And what's interesting is today, I enjoy a great deal of trust from them. I'm glad that I was able to stay long enough in the journey that, when I come up with some crazy idea today and say, what do you guys think? Should we try that? They often now like, yeah, if you think we should try that, let's go try it. So that's earning a lot of trust from faculty.
That is a lot of trust. I want to get into some of the steps that you took to do this because I think, the proof of the pudding is in the eating,
Yes,
but you've got a whole lot of ingredients that have to go into that pudding to make it taste good.
yes,
So you had mentioned being mission driven
yes,
on your focus.
yes,
And that was really the first thing that you started with.
yes. So, we did all that cutting and now we're like down to bare bones. And we're like, okay, now we have to reposition. What are we really going to reposition to? What is our bet for the future to really bring back this institution so that it is vibrant and contributing in a great way to the community? And, we had lots of group meetings on that and lots of discussions. But I remember one particular discussion with my senior team, and I said, all right, here's like these 5 ideas that have come up that I think are like the best ideas based on everybody's thinking across this institution. But we're only going to be able to probably like do 3 of them because one, we don't have much money. So what are our big bets? And my line was then, if God said to you, you have to choose today what your big bets are because you're going to live or die by these, what would they be? And oh my, that so freaked out everybody to realize how it was still very dire. We had to figure it out. And in the end, we picked 3, and one of them was like we were going to really go into in a more deliberate way building our online capacity because we served a lot of non-traditional students. The second was we were going to build our capacity. We had a Florida location to see if we could do remote education in a successful way. And the third was the one that was sort of the true getting back to our core of what our founder said, where I had come to this conclusion that higher education really was failing. That all the media that I read every single day in our educational newsletters about it being too expensive, about students not completing, about students not getting employment when they were done, that those were actually valid criticisms, and we need to figure out how to redo that. And so our three bets were we were going to completely re-envision undergraduate education, do the online, build out our online capacity, and see if we could work remotely effectively. I remember I went to the board and said, all right, I've got three bets on what we think we can do that could really change the trajectory of this institution, that really build out on our mission. And they were very excited. They were most excited about the re-envisioning of undergraduate education. And I remember saying, well, okay, great. And does anyone have any access to funding that can help us? And we did not have a lot of funding at the time. So I joke and say that we started our work with $2.50. And literally, we had cut back dramatically, but we were on fumes, and we had to really think very strategically of how do we do this.
Mm-hmm.
So we put together, I remember, a skunkworks team that have continued to be our skunkworks team, and I basically said to them, all right, I'm going to give you this crazy task. You're going to completely re-envision how we deliver undergraduate education, and I want it incredibly affordable so students don't end up with debt. I want it to be better quality at that lower cost. And I want you to use every best practice to drive great outcomes for our students. And we came up with this program that was initially called Pathways, and it exploded.
In a good way?
Yes. Oh, yeah, exploded good.
Oh, okay. Sometimes exploding means it's a
Oh, yeah,
bomb.
sorry, exploded in growth. We started out with 80 students, and we built this program that was $10,000 a year in Illinois, because you also have access to state funds. Between your state funds and your federal funds, it was there was no cost, there was no tuition, it was all covered in grants if you were a high need student. We built pathways so students weren't stuck taking courses that ended up not being relevant to their degree. We believed that we really had to work with students to make sure that not only did they finish their education, but they were employed. So we embedded a lot of career preparation across the curriculum. We believed we had to stay on top of what was happening to our students, so every student had a success coach, and we built a whole predictive analytics approach so that we had red, green, and orange zones of how students were doing, so that we proactively intervened when we saw them heading for trouble with their grades or their attendance or any of that sort of stuff. And we were serving some of our most underserved students from the south and west sides of Chicago. I mean, as well as other students, but because it was so affordable, the word got out that this was a program that would work with you and that had all this coaching and that had a lot of attention for them. And our first class, we said, oh, if we could just try this out on 25 students, it'll be great. And the word got out and we had like 85 students in a heartbeat, and off we went to the races. The following year, we had like 370 students. The following year was 550 more students. The year after that, it was 700 students. The thing was just like, we were like, oh my God, it was like, can we get enough talent in here fast enough to serve these kids?
Good problem to have.
Yes, it was a really high class problem to have, but it was also so mission relevant, because so often these kids did not see prospects for themselves. And we believed in them, and we believed in their potential, and we were doing everything we can to nourish their success. And honestly, the more time I spent with the students who were here, the more I thought, like, wow, it's hard for me to believe that so often people overlook these types of students and don't see what they're really capable of when you just give them a little bit of hope and give them the kind of support that they need.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like a big thing for us.
And so you hit break even in year 3 with 500 students.
We,
You continued to grow, you built credibility. There's another piece with this that you've touched on earlier, is the culture.
yes.
You had to build a faculty trust, but you also had to change the culture from that which was traditional higher ed to more of an entrepreneurial. We're going to go ahead and try things.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how you changed that mentality.
Yes. So we, I mean, when I came here, people did say we're very innovative. But and I would say compared to other higher ed institutions, this was a more innovative institution, but it was more like innovative chaos, that everybody would just try any kind of innovation for any reason and talk about how we were innovative. And I think pretty first thing was sort of to get clear on what kind of innovation were we really trying to pursue? And it became clear, what we articulate is that we're innovative on behalf of our students. All of our innovation is to either improve student outcomes or student learning or the student experience. So once that became clear, it's like some of the things that kept getting tagged as innovative started to slow down. The second was really talking about how do we go about being innovative? And that took a little more work over time because we were teaching, first of all, a culture where people were not afraid to make decisions and a culture where we believed you should move fast and fail fast and keep improving. So continuous improvement meant
Wait a
fast
minute.
failure.
Wait a minute. Failing fast in higher ed? What an oxymoron.
Yes, it is an oxymoron, and it was one of the harder concepts to teach, and I wouldn't say it's just higher ed though. When you think about it, most people hate talking about failure, fast or slow, and, and don't see it as the opportunity that it represents. And so, I one of the things I also started to do was about 10 years ago, I started going to every one of our new hire orientations. And I think by now I've probably like covered 70% of our population in 10 years is probably 70% is new, where I would talk about the importance of decision making and the importance of failure. And I would talk about our success is actually built on a mountain of failure. It is not built on a mountain of success, as people like to make you think it is. And that we believed in you should take chances, calculated chances, always on behalf of our students and make decisions. And so one of the cultural things that's just a small symbolic thing, but we started building these get out of jail free cards. So for the last 10 years, every new employee gets this get out of jail free card. And I always say, like, I want you to never feel like you can't make the decision. And if a student's coming to you and they need something, rather than saying, I don't know, or either figure it out with them or take them to the person that can figure it out or give them an answer or, do something because indecision is so much worse than the wrong decision. And even if it's the most horrible wrong decision, 95% of the time we can undo it. And I'd much rather you make a decision than kill the culture of the university by not making decisions. So honestly, over the years, people have gotten much more comfortable about like taking risks and getting this concept of failing fast. Even our faculty, like I don't know any other faculties that will put together a pilot governance structure like year after year to try to figure out what's the best way to go, knowing that initially our faculty were like, no, this is the way it has to be. It has to always be this way forever. And I'm like, I don't know, you guys aren't even enjoying it. Try this for a year and let's review it in a year. And if you hate it, let's do something different. And then I started doing it and they actually like totally embrace it now. Like at the end of the year, like, well, I like this doesn't work. I think we need to tweak this. So I'm like, how about that? Look at that continuous improvement. Notice where we're failing. How do we change it? I think it's really become sort of embedded and people feel comfortable with it at this point.
And one of the things that you'd mentioned that you tell folks at orientation, there's nothing that's written in stone.
Yes. Yes. And not only is nothing written in stone, but always question the status quo. We are big questioners of the status quo.
I remember that one from back at the 60s. Don't trust anybody over 30.
Well, I think there's oftentimes we get trapped in some of our own traditions. So I'm always like,
We do.
question it. Does it really have to be that way?
We do. The other thing that I really like, you've reinforced the culture really well, but you've also made data-driven decisions. You build data into everything.
Yes, yes.
You had relayed a story about, taking a look at the data.
We, first of all, we're a very equity-driven institution, and so you're about the culture, you're right. It wasn't just about making decisions and all that. It was also about being incredibly data-driven, and it was also about being very collaborative. So all of that was sort of part of what was driving the way we would do things. But the data-driven part, like we use that to figure out. I always say we are data informed, not data driven, because we make decisions. The data is one piece of evidence. It's a very important piece, but sometimes you go like, here's the data, but my gut says because of this, we're going to go this way. So, and that's okay. But one of the things like we saw is we look at a lot of the equitable outcomes of our students. And one of the things we saw is that our men of color were failing fast and dropping out of the program at higher rates than everybody else. And this is a national trend, but we were looking at it, we were so puzzled because we had such a diverse population. So we thought people would feel a sense of connection. Well, the data was clear. We had the same issue everybody else did. And we started unpacking it. We did some interviewing and saw that, wait, there was not a sense of belongingness, which led to a lot of attrition. So we built this program called the Eagle Brotherhood that was basically an affinity group for our men of color, led by one of our success coaches who's a man of color. And like all of a sudden, the attrition rate like reverses. It reverses, but the academic performance continues to be an issue. So we're like, all right, we've got them connected. We've got them excited about being here. Now, how do we help them build their sense of agency that they're committed to the work? And so we're still working on that and figuring it out. But that's what I mean by the data kept telling us what to do in terms of what we needed to improve. When we saw that, we early on saw the issues of students having some lack of preparedness, like for the college work. So that, the research said to us, do it all co-curricularly. So we very early on built co-curricular courses that helped bring them up to speed while they were in their college programs. So everything was very much about what are we seeing and what do we need to do about it.
Which is incredible. It's a great story. And this is part of the reason why you are ranked 18th nationally in the Washington Monthly College Rankings. And this
Yes.
includes a lot of prestigious Ivy schools, etc. And your students are debt free. I mean, I'm very disappointed though. You have had to raise your tuition from $10,000 to $11,000 a year. I
We
mean,
did.
shame, shame.
We did. It's still
But
all covered though, because their reimbursement rates went up a bit too. But we've had to staff a little higher to give them the support they need.
mhm.
And so the cost was going up a little bit. We're like, all right, I think we can afford this. They won't get dinged because their tuition will still be covered. And we've been able to now add some additional sort of student affairs folks that help with a lot of the co-curricular work and more resources to our career area because we're really committed to their transition into employment when they finish. But yeah, it's still going really well. But I'll tell you, you have to constantly think about what do your learners and your students need to be successful. And so we're now actually looking at how do we make it a 3-year program? How do we build in
Oh,
work as part of the program? And how can the work be part of a competency-based approach with the coursework they do to accelerate the learning and get their credentials faster? So we're constantly looking for ways to help our students, and that's what I mean by innovation on behalf of our students, of what does the model need to look like now in order to address the needs we're seeing with the students that we have.
one of my favorite quotes that I talk to my clients about when it's starting strategic planning or anything like that, it's like it was from Jack Welch, the former CEO of General Electric. He said, when the rate of change outside an institution becomes faster than the rate of change inside an institution, the end is coming. You have embraced that in a major way by continuing the innovation. It's not a matter of sitting on your laurels. It's looking at what your students, and again, very mission focused, what your students need and how do you provide them to transform their lives. So, congratulations. You have done an amazing job
You're
here.
too kind. You're too kind. That's it. That's such an interesting quote. I mean, that ties right into all the work on disruption in higher education, but I hadn't heard it like articulated in that way. And that makes sense because we do have a lot of change happening outside higher ed. I know that in one of my presentations to the community, I said, higher ed right now is the public ranks us with less confidence than they rank government, Congress, and big business. I'm like, can you believe it? We are viewed as less trustworthy than government, Congress, and big business. I'm like, we got an image problem.
I would say so for sure. What's your Skunk Works doing now? Because I know it's still going.
Yeah, well, they're working on a couple of things. They're also my
You probably
innovation
can't
team.
talk about them because they're stock. It's in the Skunk Works. You can't talk about them, right?
No,
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 I'm
we can
just
talk
kidding.
about it. So one of them is the 3-year degree program. One of them is looking at how do we more effectively work in competency-based. One of them is now in launch phase where we're doing short-term credentials that stack into the degree. That's the third one that we're working on. But interestingly, yesterday they came to me and they got their hands on, boy, people should be looking at this. We have this whole Turnitin thing where you look and see if someone's been plagiarizing. Well, there are now AI technologies which are going to be a huge threat to higher ed because you literally go into this AI, and I watched this, they did this for me, and they like saying, okay, say I want to write a paper on the Ukraine. So they put in Ukrainian war, impact on children, nuclear. They put like 6 words, and this AI wrote 3 paragraphs. And it was perfect and put in references. And then you could ask it to outline the paper that was going to follow. And then you could tweak and add a few more words, like, no, and it wrote this. I'm like, oh, we're screwed.
We're in trouble.
So these are the kinds of things
Oh,
we
gosh.
constantly look at and say, how do we use this or manage around this? So that was like hot off the press from the Skunk Works team yesterday that looks not only at launching projects, but constantly scanning to see things that are going to impact us. I was like, wow.
Wow. Really. And for your fellow presidents, at least I would say if you don't have a Skunk Works team that's actively working to improve your institution, you're going backwards.
Yeah, in this day and age, for sure.
So we're at the we've blown through our time here, and I knew this was going to happen. Uh, Nivine, 3 takeaways for your fellow presidents and boards.
One I would say is, well, I think I already said it, is I think we have to stop accepting the norms that exist. We have to really rethink our business model of higher ed. 2 is culture does trump strategy over and over again. It does. So don't shortchange it. Because I always joke around, resistance comes from everywhere, so you got to really keep driving culture. And
Mhm.
3, I would say, is I think we have to become more and more embracing the importance of data and the work that we do and using data as our way to help us inform the decisions we make in higher ed.
Inform, but not completely drive.
Right,
Right.
right.
Great. Thank you. So what's next for you, Naveen?
So, I mean, I'm going to continue to build here for a little bit, but I always think that the thing I'd like to do after that is to put together an institute to train presidents for what I think the modern university needs. Because every time I look at the different ones, I always feel like they do really amazing stuff to help people understand the university, but I don't feel like they really help drive the understanding of the business of education. And given that the business model is the one that's so in question, I feel like we really have to help presidents think as CEOs and understand the key drivers of their enterprise and all of that. So that's my thing, is I'm going to try that and see what happens.
I think that's a great ambition to have. Naveen, thank you so much for being on the show. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening today, and a special thank you to today's special guest, Dr. Nivine Megahed, and for her sharing with us the amazing turnaround story of National Louis University. Thanks, Nivine. I look forward to having you back on the show in the future. Our next guest is Julie Peller of the Higher Learning Advocates, a Washington firm that conducts policy analysis, provides expert testimony, and works to educate policymakers on key issues. Julie will be joining us to talk about their latest initiative, Widen the Path.
Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic, along with show notes on this episode at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show, and we would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drumm McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.